In the hotel mirror, I adjust my navy dress. The silk scarf hides a silver scar along my cheek. 3 years ago, my family held a funeral for me. They told the town I died in a wreck. Today, I will walk into my sister Sarah's wedding. 200 guests, a church, and a ghost they buried. My hands shake as I steady my breath and courage. Will my father recognize me or try to bury me again? I open the door and step toward the music. If ghosts breathe, mine is breathing loud enough for judgment. I came for truth, not forgiveness, and not permission. My name is Meline Miller, 28, living in Seattle. I was the daughter who asked why, not how high. Dad ran the bank, Mom ran the church committees weekly. Sarah, the golden child, became a gentle elementary school teacher. I fell in love with David Chen, a resident physician. Our home grew from grief into work, dumplings, and laughter. A wreck scarred my face and rewrote my family script. They held a funeral. I learned how absence becomes armor. I built Cascade Creative from a spare bedroom to studio. Success arrived. Their blessing didn't, and the silence hardened. Sarah's engagement post reopened a door I thought was bricked. After today, she will know the truth, whatever it costs. I grew up where everybody knew everybody else's business. Dad managed loans, Mom managed prayer lists and church kitchens. Sarah obeyed rules and collected praise like choir ribbons. I asked questions, drew maps, and dreamed of wider highways. I met David on a rain-bright Portland afternoon. He was sleepless and kind, a resident living on coffee. He listened like oxygen and laughed like a warm porch. We texted between shifts and counted blessings between bills. Bringing him home felt like walking into weather warnings. Dad's smile held splinters. His questions carried census checkboxes. Mom's politeness came starched, pressed, and colder than January. Traditions matter, Dad said. We don't mix like that. Their dining room smelled like roast beef and disapproval. After dessert, the Inquisition replaced conversation with careful accusations. They weighed surnames like evidence and ignored his character. I cried in the car and promised love anyway. The months that followed were interrogations with Sunday leftovers. Where did you go? Did he pray properly? Why him? I learned how walls echo when faith turns into fear. Mom shook her head. Dad checked curfews like bank ledgers. Sarah whispered, "He's nice," then folded under the pressure. David proposed quietly with a ring and dumpling dinner. "Choose a future with me," he said, gentle and steady. I said yes because love told the truth kindly. The next day, I gathered everyone in the living room. "David and I are getting married next month," I said. The newspaper crackled. Mom's needles froze mid-stitch. Dad stood so fast the chair scraped hardwood like thunder. "As long as you live here, you obey us." "You will not marry that man," he said, shaking. Silence counted seconds between my heartbeat and his rules. Sarah tried diplomacy. Dad demanded verdicts, not conversations. "Him or us," he said, and the house tilted. "I choose him," I whispered, choosing breath over borrowed approval. "Then you're no daughter of mine," he answered, final and flat. I packed a suitcase while Mom cried without meeting eyes. Sarah hugged me in the driveway and begged for patience. I promised to love her always, then drove toward Portland. We rented a small apartment above a bakery. Mornings smelled like proofing dough and David's terrible coffee. His mother visited and taught me sesame scallion pancakes. For 6 months, we built a life that fit. At night, he practiced sutures. I sketched logo drafts. Joy, tender and practical, felt like a sturdy table. I kept wishing family could pull up a chair. October rain turned highways into dark ribbons with teeth. A truck skidded. Taillights blurred. Then there was glass. I woke in a hospital 3 impossible weeks later. My leg wore hardware. My cheek wore a silver seam. David slept in a chair, holding my wrapped hand. He called my parents the night of the crash. He said my name. Dad said he had none. "She made her choice," he told David, and hung up. Pain radiated, but those words bruised deeper than metal. I dialed home. The number dissolved into a disconnection. We learned the town held a funeral without a body. A classmate recognized me and handed David the clipping. "Beloved daughter remembered," it read, rewriting my entire biography. I learned how erasure dresses itself as piety and reputation. They grieved a version of me that never existed. Sarah's quote killed me and kept me breathing simultaneously. She was the best big sister, the paper printed faithfully. She visited a stone while I learned to walk. Every step measured distance between love and sanctioned forgetting. Grief sat heavy. Depression made mornings thick and edgeless. David held me steady and reminded me to eat. His family folded me in like another beloved cousin. We left Oregon because memory watched from every porch. Seattle offered sky, ferries, and a quieter street corner. We started again with secondhand desks and a printer. Cascade Creative lived in our spare bedroom beside succulents. I designed menus, murals, and identities for scrappy restaurants. Clients paid late sometimes, but referrals arrived like migrating birds. Work stitched, meaning where permission once tried to live. David finished residency, then became the calm in triage. Evenings returned to ordinary miracles: eggs, dumplings, shoulders unclenching. The scar faded into a silver reminder, not shame. It said, "You survived impact, rebuild with honest materials only." I missed Sarah whenever school year calendars rolled around. I pictured her reading aloud to small, bright classrooms. I kept her butterfly necklace in a blue dish. Letters unwritten stacked themselves behind my throat quietly. I practiced conversations that never outran the fear. I did not contact my parents again after that. Their silence was a choice. Mine became a boundary. I stopped auditioning for a family that preferred a ghost. Instead, I grew a business and watered my own garden. I learned belonging that doesn't require shrinking to fit. In February, insomnia found me scrolling past bedtime, heart heavy. Sarah's username appeared like a lighthouse I never stopped watching. A beach proposal photo glowed, captioned with hope and ache. She wrote she wished her sister could be there too. I pressed the phone to my chest and cried silently. David came downstairs, water in hand, reading my face. "She's engaged," I whispered. "She thinks I'm blessing from heaven." He sat beside me and let the storm pass. "I'm sorry," he said. "This is going to hurt." The days after blurred between work deadlines and wedding posts. Sarah posted dress fittings, cake tastings, and church announcements. Between every smile, she tucked a shadow shaped like me. I followed from a burner account with a stranger's name. I cataloged joy and cataloged the seasons I had missed. Her fiancé, Marcus, looked kind, hands gentle, eyes steady. He belonged in our family more than I ever did. That thought stung, then softened into something like relief. At least she chose someone who would not make speeches. I argued with myself while brushing teeth and printing invoices. Truth demanded sunlight. Kindness begged me to write instead. David urged patience, safety, and a plan that protected Sarah. I promised not to make a scene, only be seen. He said weddings magnify feelings, and shock can shatter memories. I said grief already shattered us. Truth might glue edges. He worried small towns collect spectacles like church programs and magnets. I worried lies collect interest like banknotes accrue shame. In May, the invitation details appeared beneath a photo. St. Mary's Church at 2:30, Riverside reception to follow. I memorized the map like homework assigned by an ache. For weeks I woke thinking go, then don't, then go. I rehearsed entrances in my head and exits in sneakers. I imagined slipping into a pew, sitting behind a pillar. I imagined leaving after catching her eye and nodding once. I imagined everything except the sound of my father's voice. David booked a refundable room I swore I wouldn't use. Then I used it, because pretending is not preparation. On August 15th, I woke before the alarm could speak. The hotel air conditioner hummed a tempo I could borrow. I laid out the navy dress and silk scarf deliberately. I traced my scar the way sailors trace old roots. In the mirror, I greeted a woman with steadier knees. I told her we would breathe and leave if necessary. I texted David, "I love you." He replied, "I'm here." I put my phone on airplane mode like a ritual. Makeup concealed brightness, but not history. Scarves softened truth's arrival. I tied and retied the knot until my hands steadied. I chose nude heels because running sometimes lives inside courage. I ate half a banana and called it breakfast. Barely. I printed a photo of us laughing for Sarah's pocket. I slipped it in my clutch beside tissues and chapstick. I added a pen because words sometimes require signatures. In the parking lot, sun baked the asphalt into mirage. Main Street looked unchanged, gossip weathered but still very alive. I drove past the diner where pancakes once forgave sermons. I slowed near the park where Sarah learned bicycle bravery. Everything was familiar and rearranged, like furniture moved an inch. I parked 3 blocks away, habit from small-town math. The church bells tolled, insisting the day would proceed anyway. Guests drifted toward red doors in pressed suits and chiffon. I recognized faces like yearbook photos that learn new decades. Mrs. Henderson carried a casserole dish instead of her purse. Mr. Peterson limped carefully, still wearing his bow tie. The Johnsons argued softly, choreography older than their marriage certificate. My palms sweated. I wiped them on courage and fabric. I waited until the processional started before climbing the steps. Inside, incense and wood polish braided into a memory rope. I hid in the last pew, half concealed by a column. The sanctuary filled with whispers, programs, and camera phones lowered. I saw the back of Dad's head, hair completely gray. Mom sat beside him, thinner, posture straight like pew slats. I felt 17 and 30 at the same exact time. Then the doors opened and Sarah walked the aisle luminous. Lace sleeves, small white flowers, a bouquet like childhood Saturdays. She looked joyful and also haunted by a missing chair. I pressed my hand against the pew until Wood answered. Marcus waited at the altar, looking at her like shelter. Their vows promised patience with storms neither could control alone. When Sarah spoke, I heard my name without hearing letters. She thanked love for surviving losses that should have broken her. She kept a piece of her heart reserved for me. I bit my lip and counted breaths like metronome clicks. I clutched the photo in my clutch until edges dented. When they kissed, applause rolled like a soft summer thunder. I stayed seated while the aisle flooded with congratulations and perfume. I let them pass, shoulders brushing air that remembered us. In the vestibule, I ducked behind a bulletin board gently. I should have left then, another ghost slipping back waterside. Instead, I followed a stream of guests to the parking. Riverside Country Club shimmered behind glass like curated nostalgia. Sarah and I learned putting once on those patient greens. The terrace smelled like roses and rain evaporating from stone. I stood outside the ballroom windows and watched the beginning. First dances look simple. They are complicated choreography of lifetimes. Sarah and Marcus moved like they had practiced listening together. At last floated through and several women wiped mascara carefully. A waiter slid doors open and I retreated to shadows. Inside, Dad and Sarah began their dance to butterfly kisses. He spun her slowly. She laughed and cried into porcelain. I remembered my graduation party when he spun me gently. Before I became a cautionary tale, I was his pride. The memory stung. I swallowed hard and let it pass. The toasts began. College stories, classroom stories, meeting stories. Hope. Mom spoke about a baby girl becoming a gracious woman. I watched her words and wondered if grace includes amends. Marcus thanked everyone, grinning like a lighthouse-turned person. He promised to protect Sarah's heart without locking any doors. My chest ached with tenderness and something like survivor's guilt. Aunt Margaret dabbed tears and laughed at her own tenderness. I hid behind a planter and practiced being invisible again. A little girl waved. I waved back and zipped heart. I checked the exits 3 times and rehearsed leaving quietly. I wanted Sarah to see me. I feared she wouldn't. I feared she would, and the room would learn everything. My phone vibrated with nothing because airplane mode is mercy. I said a prayer without words and named boundaries again. When the servers cleared plates, speech cards shuffled like fortunes. Sarah stood, bouquet folded in her hands like a truth. She thanked the room and then named the empty space. She said my name and dedicated the bouquet to me. The crowd hushed the way oceans hush before a wave. I understood then that hope kept her company every morning. I could not leave her carrying grief shaped like my face. A breeze from the vents lifted the edge of curtains. Chandeliers trembled slightly with footsteps, like water under wind. A server set down flutes, glass gently kissing white linen. 2 teenagers whispered, then shushed each other, eyes saucer-wide. A toddler pointed at me, then at himself, confused, curious. My throat clicked. I swallowed and named the moment ordinary. It helped to name things when storms pretended to behave. I thought of Sarah's butterfly necklace, warm against winter sweaters. I thought of the day she finally rode without training wheels. I pictured her calling me fearless while I pretended not shaking. I counted pew carvings earlier. Now I counted breath again. I am here, I told myself, not the memory museum. If anyone asks my name, I will speak it calmly. If anyone asks my marriage, I will answer with joy. If anyone asks my scar, I will answer with truth. The band vamped lightly while the MC made soft jokes. The room loosened, then tightened again, sensing a change approaching. Even the ice in pitchers sounded careful when someone poured. A camera flash popped. Sparkles ricocheted across polished glass. The smell of roses mingled with buttercream and floor polish. My heels pressed crescents into memory dust on the threshold. I touched the photo in my clutch like a talisman. Sarah laughing near a fountain, hair wet from rain. We had dared each other to run through sprinklers barefoot. We had promised to tell the truth even when lonely. Promises keep better when someone names them out loud. I wished I had named mine sooner. in letters, calls. Shame can tie knots that look like bows to outsiders. I untied one inside my chest and breathed deeper. Aunt Margaret laughed from inside. I recognized her low sparkle. Uncle Robert's silhouette cut across the window like steady timber. Cousin Jenny clapped on the offbeat, then corrected, always earnest. These were people who bought casseroles and brought folded chairs. These were people who taught me to send thank yous. I wondered who would teach them how to hold this. The sky outside shifted to apricot, then softened toward lavender. I could hear sprinklers far off ticking like reassuring metronomes. The golf course smelled like cut grass and summer's last patience. Someone opened a side door. A draft licked the candles. A waiter stepped out, saw me, and gave a nod. Not recognition, just acknowledgement. A person, not a headline. He asked, "Do you need water?" I shook my head. "Later," I said, "thank you." He slipped inside silently. I checked my posture the way athletes check their stance. Knees soft, shoulders down, chin level, eyes ready to witness. Witnessing is harder than speeches and easier than pretending forever. Quiet rules, practical, invisible, not a performance for anyone. Hands relaxed, voice calm, focus only on Sarah's face. Pocket a pebble of David's steadiness, let nerves settle. Hold Seattle's evening light in mind. It softens edges. Keep Sarah's classroom stories near. They prove a softer strength. Inhale 4 counts. Exhale longer. Let heat roll past. Speak once, cleanly. Allow silence to finish the sentence. Leave space where grace might step forward and stand. The MC invited single friends toward the center circle. Shoes squeaked, bracelets chimed. Anticipation brightened like stage lights. My heart answered with a thrum I recognized from triage. It said, "Steady, steady, steady, we are not alone." I angled my body so Sarah would see me clearly. I angled my hope so it would not bruise others. I held still long enough for quiet to choose me. When quiet chose me, I stepped once closer to presence. The band shifted from Motown into the MC's microphone patter. Single women gathered, laughing, around a circle of polished floor. Sarah lifted the bouquet, smiled bright and complicated as memory. I waited one more heartbeat, honoring every version of us. Then I pushed the door, and the room turned toward weather. People looked up, then through me, then directly at me. The music thinned, uncertain, then softened like a curtain lowering. I took 3 steps in and felt old years loosen. Sarah's hand dropped. The bouquet hovered in a half-throw. I stood there, breathing, while the room held its breath. Sarah's bouquet fell, thudding against the polished floor. Her eyes found mine like a secret surfacing suddenly. Gasps rippled, chairs scraped. Someone whispered, "Is that Meline?" Cold attention climbed my skin from doorway to chandelier. Dad rose, finger shaking, face dark with pulsing veins. "Why are you still alive?" he shouted into the hush. "You were supposed to be dead," he added, breath ragged. Mom sagged. Aunt Margaret steadied her, jaw set hard. Sarah moved first, wedding dress gathering like a small storm. She collided with me, arms fierce, mascara loosening. "You're alive!" she cried. "You're really here! You're here!" "I'm here," I said, steadying both our shaking lungs. She turned to our parents, voice sharpening into teacher steel. "What is happening? What did you do to us?" Dad's mouth opened, closed. He searched faces for an ally. I stepped forward so everyone could hear one sentence. 3 years ago, I survived a wreck. I called. David called. You hung up. Then you staged a funeral. A murmur rose, then fell back into listening. Mom said, "You chose him over family. You were gone." Aunt Margaret snapped, "Patricia, tell the whole truth, not slogans." I kept my voice even, clear enough for witnesses. You disconnected the house line and blocked my emails. You told neighbors not to answer questions about me. You printed an obituary without my husband's name anywhere. You let Sarah cry at a stone covering grass. Each fact clicked like a lock closing on a lie. Sarah flinched, anger blooming through shock like a sunrise. "You let me grieve a living sister," she said. You watched holidays hurt and nodded as if righteous. That wasn't protection. That was cruelty in church clothes. Dad turned fury toward me, trying to regain the room. "You could have come home. You chose stubborn estrangement." "I chose safety," I replied. "You chose erasure over apology." My husband called from the hospital. You chose reputation. You told a town I died to avoid being wrong. Marcus reached Sarah's side, his hand firm and gentle. "Private room," he offered. She shook her head immediately. "They lied publicly," she said. "We correct it publicly." She faced the guests, voice calm, breath measured, shoulders square. My parents announced my sister's death while she was alive. They asked all of you to carry their fiction. Today the truth arrived in a navy dress. That's all. Aunt Margaret crossed to me, squeezing my still trembling hand. I suspected, she whispered. Now everyone knows why it stank. Sarah turned back to the people who raised us. I love you, she said, but you can't stay. You don't get cake after serving 3 years' grief. Leave now. We'll talk when accountability shows up first. Mom pleaded, We're your parents. How can you do this? Parent is a verb, Sarah answered. You declined it wrong. Love doesn't need a casket to dodge an apology. They walked out through a corridor of silent witnesses. The doors closed. Chandeliers finally, mercifully, stopped trembling. Silence remained, choosing sides without raising its voice. Sarah faced me again, palm searching until it found mine. We will salvage our day, she said, teacher strong. Not by pretending, by naming what's real together. Marcus lifted the fallen bouquet with careful, reverent hands. For my sister, Sarah said, who refused to stay buried. For honesty that breaks lies and repairs what's left. My throat burned. I nodded so words wouldn't shatter. We hugged, not performance, just anchors finding deeper water. A few guests wept. Others exhaled tension like smoke. The band found a key and eased the room forward. I turned to the crowd, offered one sentence and breath. Thank you for witnessing, I said. We'll handle the rest. Respect moved like tide. People stepped back, giving shoreline. Aunt Margaret collected relatives. Marcus guided questions away gently. I walked onto the terrace for air that wasn't staged. Night gathered over lawns that remembered childhood summers. Through glass, Sarah laughed through tears with 2 bridesmaids. Marcus kissed her temple. The floor held their joy. Soft footsteps approached. I didn't need to turn. They belonged to the girl I helped raise brave. Please don't disappear, she whispered, forehead resting against mine. Not again, not ever. We'll write a better story. I won't, I said. Coffee tomorrow, then everything else. The DJ announced cake. Forks clinked. Life resumed shape. Inside, a little girl practiced catching flowers with both hands. Outside, I pressed my palm to the cool French door. I wasn't a ghost. I was the living answer. Not their secret, not their shame, not their cautionary tale. I belonged to love, to truth, to breath I own. I choose life, I said, and the night agreed. By morning, our town reheated the story for breakfast. Photos circulated with captions that guessed, embellished, and scolded. Truth, once public, stopped asking permission at familiar tables. Sarah texted at 8, then called, voice tired and steady. Coffee? She asked. Just us. No audience, no verdicts. The diner smelled like pancakes and old Sunday bulletins. She wore yesterday's hair, jeans, and a ring catching light. Tell me everything, she said. Start where survival began. I told her David, the crash, the hospital nights, about calling home and hearing erasure pose as righteousness, about learning boundaries slowly, one honest breath at time. She listened like a teacher, hands around a chipped mug. She squeezed my fingers when sentences hit bone and burned. Then she told me classrooms, Marcus, and quiet healing habits. How she saved a chair for me at holidays. I'm glad you came, she said, even if messy. Messy is honest, I answered. We were drowning in tidy. Marcus joined later, gentle questions and zero performance. One rule, he said, kindness before conclusions, always. We nodded, 3 adults choosing something sturdier than drama. Aunt Margaret called, triumphant and protective in equal measure. Uncle Robert offered trucks if we ever needed distance. My parents did not call, apologize, or attempt comprehension. A week later, an envelope arrived in Mom's script. Dear Madeline, it began, an apology dressed for church. It named mistakes generally, avoided specifics, and requested meetings. No mention of funerals, obituaries, or 3 stolen years. David read it twice, then set it down like glass. This isn't accountability, he said. It's reputation triage. I wrote back with terms, clear as contracts and rain. Name the actions. Admit the harm. Apologize without choreography. Commit to therapy yourselves before requesting mine as mediation. Send the same letter to Sarah, handwritten, not rehearsed. Silence followed, a heavier answer than any speech delivered. Days lengthened, our studio calendar filled with patient work. Cascade Creative hired 2 interns and a project manager. At home, the air learned new rituals of gentleness. Dumplings on Tuesdays, phone-free walks, weekend hikes when possible. Sarah and I built a weekly call that never skipped. We traded lesson plans, menus, and impossible parent emails. On their first visit north, we walked Cary Park at dusk. "Teach me sesame pancakes," she said, laughter breaking like sun. We spilled flour and burned the first one completely. Presents tasted better than polish, and we kept cooking. News from home arrived through cousins and aunts intermittently. Church seating thinned. Dad alternated fury and silence. Mom hosted sympathy like an endless potluck in the kitchen. I wished them healing from a distance that protected breathing. 3 months later, a final envelope came without return address. Dad's apology, 12 rigid sentences, optics over ownership. He accepted nothing, regretted embarrassment, demanded reconciliation immediately. I placed it beneath Mom's letter and closed the drawer. Sarah read copies, then drew her own clear line. "I'm stepping back," she said. "My peace outranks their pride." She sent boundaries, not ultimatums, and kept them. Love can be a door that stays latched without malice. Therapy taught me to hold contradictions without dropping either side. I grieved parents who existed and parents I imagined. I allowed rage to visit, then asked it to leave. Forgiveness became posture, private, revised for my body. It didn't excuse. It unhooked me from endless courtrooms. We planted tomatoes, watched them split, then sweeten anyway. I framed the clipping beside David's medical school photo. Not a shrine or spite, just artifacts reframed by context. Beside them, the snapshot from the reception fountain returned home. On quiet mornings, I touched the frame and chose again. Choose truth over choreography, boundaries over auditions for love. Choose showing up together over saving face forever. Sarah bought a house nearer ferries and weekend visits. Her students call her funny, fierce, and surprisingly good pitcher. Marcus coaches Little League and grills salmon like a scientist. At Christmas, they stayed 3 nights, tracking pine needles everywhere. We burned cinnamon rolls and praised outrageously ugly sweaters. Later, we counted lights and planned an easier spring. "Do you think they'll change?" she asked softly. "Maybe," I said, "but we won't pause lives to measure. Change is their homework. Ours is joy without apology." We sketched mountains, markets, and a bigger table together. Family grew by choice. Neighbors, coworkers, friends who are family. I tucked the old scarf that hid my scar away. Mostly the silver line showed, honest as a roadmap. It reminded me survival asks rebuilding with honest materials. Sometimes I drove to a quiet waterfront bench alone. I wrote letters I never mailed, addressed to the past. I thanked the girl who left with one small suitcase. I thanked the woman who walked through French doors deliberately. I thanked the sister who caught me, mascara and miracle. On our anniversary, David cooked eggs exactly like beginnings. "To the life we chose," he said, raising a glass. "To the love that didn't need a funeral to stay." Later, we talked about children, not repair, just abundance. Future felt like clear air, not conditional invitations. When fear visited, I labeled it weather and closed windows. When joy visited, I opened every curtain and let sun. On a Tuesday, Sarah sent a photo of her classroom. Caption: "Today we practiced apology that names actions and impact." Her students wrote, erased, rewrote, then read aloud bravely. At the locks, a salmon jumped. Strangers clapped with both hands. "Upstream isn't only suffering," Sarah said, pointing and laughing. When goodbye came, it didn't taste like abandonment anymore. It tasted like "see you soon," destinations chosen by us. Back home, twilight settled. The skyline and scar held steady. I wasn't a ghost. I was a woman with longitude. My coordinates included grief, love, Seattle, and my sister's laughter. I set 2 mugs out and texted Sarah a heart. Some stories end with fireworks. Ours chooses continuity instead. I choose life again, not once, but as daily practice. Not for their approval, not against them, but for us. Did this story hit close to home? Would you have revealed yourself at the wedding or waited for a quieter moment? Tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done. I read every comment, and your perspective may help someone else feel less alone. If it resonated, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can find these real family stories about truth, boundaries, and healing. Thank you for being here.